Okay, who is actually going to go first? Want to start down in the end? Okay. So if we can get Adam and Carrie up to the stage. Thank you.
Good morning. We are not big speakers, so our experience with the retail is we did play both sides of the fence. We opened up a legal shop, and we went on for about 7 months until we got raided. And then it was the drive home when my daughter was in the dispensary when it got raided, crying and saying the RCMP, they're taking everything out of my store, is where we decided to shut our store down and apply for the license. And working with the government and stuff, it was a good experience as far as me and my wife had with the government working with that. They made it very simple. They answered a lot of questions that that we stumble upon. And so if there's any questions anybody has.
What did I want to say? Our intentions actually were to go legal prior to being raided, and and we totally had planned on shutting down, whereas other people didn't. And everybody thought the process was going to be really hard, but it really wasn't. They had an awesome help desk. Every time I had a problem, pick up the phone, they walked me through it. It was pretty simple. Anybody can do it. It's probably the hardest part was trying to say we have an address on a reserve. They didn't get that because we had to do the PST numbers and all that kind of stuff. Oh, sorry. Anyways, yeah. So I think retail, it wasn't as lucrative as we thought it was going to be, but it's longevity, it's our kids' future, and it's getting better. It's every day is building up, and it's a good business.
And there's no stress level. Having the illegal one, there was way too much stress that was attached to it. Wondering when the RCMP are going to come and.
We like our freedom. We
yeah, and then and the biggest thing is too is, as our family, we like to travel, and to get someone get arrested in there, now that stops your travel, because now you go to the airport, you're going to be turned around, and we just didn't want any of that. To me, it wasn't worth it. The money wasn't worth the aggravation that was going to come along with getting raided or getting charged. And I appreciate the ones that are out there doing without the license, because half of them are my cousins that are doing it. I go clear their snow, I fix their driveways so they can get their customers in there. So I think we're all handed an advantage, and we all just take the advantage and run with it. But you got to take the consequences that goes with it. The police show up, they charge you, you end up in court with all these court fees and lawyer fees. It all comes with it. Now with the license, I don't have to ever look over my back, because there's no stress level, because I know it's just a legit. Yes, the money is not as good as running illegal, but the freedom of the stress is definitely worth it. So.
That's it. We're good?
Thank you.
So what we'll do is we'll just go through the panelists, and then we'll put it out to the audience for questions. So next speaker, please.
Tleko matmas ochlamach tapushkwa his Dr. Sahai Hugh Breaker, Councillor for Tsesha at First Nation. I did send in, or we send in a PowerPoint presentation. I'm assuming that the organizers are going to make it available to you online. Before I go into the outline of our retail outlet, I wanted to take a couple of minutes in advance and outline to you what are some of the problems that we face. Remember that across Canada, the problems for the First Nations retail outlets are different depending on your provincial laws and how the province approaches cannabis sales. In BC, ours is quite rigorous and very, there's a lot of roadblocks. I was looking at the statistics this morning, and I think Alberta's up to around 280 retail outlets now in Alberta. British Columbia is just a little over 70. So there's quite a difference in the provinces and how they approach cannabis sales. We have a lot of problems here. One is getting the product. Sometimes we have 2-week waits for particular products that are popular with the purchasers. We could buy a lot, we could order a lot, but then as a small retail outlet, you've got the problem of where do you store it? You've got to have security for this product, and there's a big problem with storing it. And also you have to wait, you have to be able to invest a lot of money in buying the product and then waiting for the purchasers to come in and buy it before you get your money back, even though you have a 30 to 40% markup rate, which is what ours is. So there's a big problem in BC with getting the product. The quality is very poor. You're going to get lots of complaints from purchasers saying that the quality is poor. The product is just too dry. We are still getting product in our store from 2018. And the purchasers don't want that. It's too dry. So there's a big problem with the quality of the product, and it's not one that we can change. The province of British Columbia says that they must dry it out as much as possible to meet the requirements for guarantees of no mold that are made by Health Canada. So we have a problem with getting the product, and when we do get it, it tends to be very dated, and we have a problem with selling it. This is driving purchasers back to the gray and the black market. They would rather go there and get product that is not so dry than to come to our store and get the really dry product. So it is a big problem for us. There's the packaging in BC. My God. If you want to get an eighth, you have to get a box that's 6 by 4 inches, and inside there's another little box that's a bit smaller. Inside there's a plastic container, and inside that is the product wrapped in plastic. This is an incredible waste, and it creates a problem for us because, number one, the purchasers are angry that they've got to dispose of this stuff, and if we take the packaging back, we've got to get rid of it somehow. So we're hoping to set up a recycling operation with one of the producers who sends us product. They're trying to set up a recycling. The fact is they should not have to do that. In British Columbia, they are creating obstacles that are unneeded. This from an NDP government that is supposed to be in favor of stopping pollution. The packaging is a big problem in this province. Banks are a problem. If you're going to start a retail operation in British Columbia and you need to have banking services, you're going to have a problem. Our retail outlet opened in September of this year, and we still must run the paychecks for our staff through our band account because the bank has so far refused to give us an account for our retail outlet. It's the mindset of the banks. They're thinking about the gray market and the black market, and so they're hesitant and they're nervous to give us proper banking services. We're still having to run everything through our banned bank accounts. Now, I don't know what the problems are across the rest of Canada because in each province it's different. In British Columbia, the government is the middleman, which increases our costs. but the government also has retail outlets. And so in a sense, they're in competition with us as well. Okay, so I just wanted to start by outlining to you some of the problems that we're facing that we didn't quite anticipate when we decided we would start off by going into the retail business. We do want to go into production, but right now we thought we would open a retail business first, and we did not foresee the problems that we have, such as the packaging problem and the fact that banks are reluctant to open accounts for us right away. So now I can get into the proper presentation. Who are we? Sashaat First Nation is located near Port Alberni on Vancouver Island. The nice thing about my reserve, one of the nice things, is that more than 1 million tourists drive through it every year on their way to the resorts in Tofino, Yaxlowlat, and Long Beach. And so we have a market that perhaps some other First Nations do not have. The fact that we're located on reserve makes, of course, a taxation benefit for those who are registered Indians and who come to our store. In our community, we rely very much on our membership to give us direction to council. So we began the process of developing our retail outlet some time ago by consulting with community members. We have a community meeting once a month, and we asked the community to give us direction. They told us to go explore the opportunity and come back and report to them. So we did. We went back and reported to them and asked them to make a decision, yes or no, do we try it or not? It was one of the biggest band meetings we've had in the history of my tribe, and the vote was unanimous. Go for it. We finalized the license agreement. We entered into an agreement with Purple Chemist Consulting, and I believe she's going to be talking to you in a minute. We thought it was best for us to go into business with a consulting company who knew the ropes on how the difficult process of getting a license from British Columbia worked. And they've been outstanding in their work with us so far. We had to identify a place where we could sell the product. Ultimately, we chose a site which is not our favorite right now, but we're going to improve on it. It's an old house, which is located immediately adjacent to our gas bar and retail operation on our reserve. The total cost for us to start our retail operation is somewhere in the ballpark of $500,000. That included all of the licensing. It included the costs of council meeting to pass the necessary motions, etc., to get the whole thing underway. It included the costs of renovation to the building. It included everything. That's a ballpark figure because the operation opened in September and we still have not got the final figures in. They're still coming in now. But I will tell you that business has been steady. It's not overwhelming. You're not going to get rich on this. But it will provide a steady, predictable income for your tribe in addition to what you get now. So just like our gas bar operation, I can look at it and say, on average, we're going to get X number of dollars per year from the gas bar operation and X number of dollars from the deli inside and the gift shop inside as well. Now I can look at the cannabis store and say we will get X number of dollars on average from that, and it certainly helps our First Nation with our planning. The loan we got from the Nuu-chah-nulth Economic Development Corporation, we're projecting to pay it off between 3 and 5 years, but actually looking at sales over the 2 months, if that continues, we anticipate paying the loan off much earlier. So we're actually not that worried about it at all. Our store opened on September 6th with a soft opening, and then September 11th with a formal opening. People wonder why we're called Orange Bridge Cannabis. In order to get onto my reserve and cross the Somas River, you must go over a bridge. And for all of my too long a life. The bridge was orange. They just recently painted it gray, but everyone still calls it the Orange Bridge. And where I come from, it's quite often businesses will name themselves according to some landmark in the region that they're serving. And when we adopted the Orange Bridge name, there was a lot of happiness, not just in our community, but in the greater community in the Albernia Valley as well. They thought it was kind of cool that we named it Orange Bridge. We have a board of directors separate from the tribe. It's myself, the executive director of the tribe, and the finance director for the tribe. There's very little reason for the board of directors to meet. If you have a board of directors who wants to run the operation, that's the wrong people. You don't want directors to run the operation. You want a darn good business manager in there, an administrator to run your operation, who knows the products, who knows the market, who knows how to run the store. Get your board of directors out of there. Keep them out of the store. We're planning on meeting maybe once every quarter if necessary. But aside from that, there's no reason for the board of directors to meet. You don't want them to be running something that they don't know anything about. I don't know anything about retail of cannabis. So no, I have no reason to meet as a board of directors. The retail store, by the way, is 100% owned by Tseshaat First Nation. One of the problems we have in BC is with advertising. There are severe restrictions on advertising of the store. Even the windows on the store must be wrapped, or they must be what they call frosted. You cannot be able to see from outside the store into the store. To me, this is all a carryover of the morality laws that the governments used to have in Canada. You may remember, if you're as old as me, about the liquor laws that they used to have in this province a long time ago. They too, you had to have frosted windows or wrapped windows. You could not see who was buying the liquor inside the store. They used to have separate entrances on the bars. Ladies go in this door, men in this door. Otherwise, you might have rampant promiscuity or something. I don't know. Silly. When government tries to legislate morality, you run into problems. But it adds to your cost. Not only can we not advertise our products properly to the purchasers, but we must do silly things like wrap the windows on our buildings and frost them over, and this causes a big cost to us, an unnecessary cost. The government used to require it for liquor stores, but you can go to any government liquor store now and buy liquors, and there's open windows all around the building. So there's no problem. I think eventually it's going to change. We're just going to have to pull a lot of teeth in order to do so. How many hours do I have? Is it 4 minutes? Gosh. Okay, hopefully you'll all get the PowerPoint. We're hoping to move into cultivation. We chose not to rely on inherent right to self-government or inherent right to economic development in opening our cannabis store. We chose to get a license from the province of British Columbia. And the reason for that was much the same as the reason that was just mentioned to you by the previous speakers. We sat back and we assessed what are the risks of having a confrontation with the province or the police as opposed to having a licensed outlet. And we chose to have a licensed outlet. And I'm not saying we won't change that relationship later, but right now we're licensed to avoid the confrontation. Confrontation costs money. It also possibly costs you clients. If you close down for a while, they may go somewhere else. So we didn't want that as a new business just starting. We wanted to go the safe route, and we did so. One of the pluses of our business is that with the exception of one person, 100% of our staff is from our own tribe. We have created something like 9 positions of employment. The store is open from 9 a.m. in the morning, and yes, sometimes there are people waiting, from 9 a.m. in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, And yes, sometimes there are people running up the driveway saying, wait, don't close. So the attendance by clients has been steady, but I would not say it's been overwhelming or anything like that. It's just nice and steady all day long. The applications to British Columbia to get this whole thing started are incredibly complicated. It took us forever to get our staff authorized. You must be licensed by the province of British Columbia before you can even enter on the till a sale or touch a product. So you have to have, everybody has to go through the process of the criminal record checks, the background checks by the province of British Columbia in order to get your employees licensed to sell and handle product. For the longest time, when we first opened for a couple of weeks, the only person that was licensed was my 19-year-old great-nephew, because of course he's 19, he had no record, he had no problems. He was very good in school, and so he sailed through. All of the others, they were middle-aged people or older, and they all took a long time. More than a month went by for some of them, and actually I think the last one just got his license last week. So it is a problem, and that's why sometimes when people come and ask me how should they open a retail, I say go to a consulting company that knows all the rules, all the procedures, all the documents. It's just going to save you a lot of heartache. Price is a problem sometimes because of the province of British Columbia setting the price for us to purchase. They can get cheaper price on the black market and the gray market sometimes. The gray market, of course, are stores that operate illegally in BC. The black market, of course, you all know about. So it is a problem because the province of British Columbia creates a middleman scenario. I can hear the chair grunting and coughing over there. I'm assuming that means get the heck off the stage. I'll just see if there's any other point here that I need to quickly. We are told that we are way behind Washington and Oregon and that we need to do some catching up in this area. So one last point, the very last one. There is a section in British Columbia in the law called Section 119, and it allows for agreements between First Nations and the government of BC. We're still in the process of looking at that to see if this is going to be a benefit for us. We haven't decided yet if it's in our benefit to enter into one of those agreements or not, because the agreements have a lot of attachments to them. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening to me this morning. Sorry I had to rush.
That's okay. I appreciate the context, both for speakers, the first and second. Give us a really good lay of the land of what the issues and challenges are. So, Adam, if you can do this within 7.5 minutes, and then our next speaker, what we'd like to do is turn it out over to the audience for questions and answers.
All right. Miigwech. All right, let me get set up. I do have a PowerPoint. I don't know if they're going to pull that up or. All right, perfect. Just pulling up my presentation. All right. Anin Bojo, Waman Indish Nakas Megaze Dodem, Chimnising and Donjaba. Miigwech for the elder for the kind words this morning. Miigwech for that. It's an honor to be here again on the traditional territory for the second day. I'm going to try to rush through this because I guess I got 7.5 minutes. So with that, I just want to tell a quick story just before I do get started. I called my oldest son last night just to tell him where I was and see how he was doing, but he's in university taking kinesiology. He wants to be a chiropractor. So when I called him, he was too busy studying with his friends. So I ended up calling my daughter. She's 14. She doesn't accept texts or phone calls. That's not cool. So she only does Instagram or Snapchat. So I was doing cute teddy bear faces blowing kisses for half an hour. And then I called my youngest. He's 9. His name's Zayden. He's a little hockey guy. And I called him. He gave me crap, I guess, the 3rd degree there because I wasn't at his hockey practice. He was telling me if he misses hockey practice or if he's late, he's like, Dad, I get my ice time reduced. Maybe you don't get to watch my game. He'd give me the hard time. But I told him where I was, and he wanted me to share a joke with everybody. But I'm just going to share it. It's his joke, so if everybody's ready, it's here we go. Knock, knock. Hetch. Bless you. I'm here all week. But okay, today I was asked to speak about the cannabis retail experience of mine. We don't have a retail store up and running just yet. But we are very close. Our retail store will be operating under a license granted by the Ontario government. All right. Oh, maybe I went the wrong way. Okay, I'm not going to cover this. I covered this yesterday. This is Shawanagan's Robinson Huron area. You can see the 2 red dots there. That's the reserve lands, but I covered on that yesterday. And these are just some main pillars I wanted to highlight again. I just want to touch on these briefly. For where everything I think for Shawanagan started changing was when we implemented our our constitution policy. That allowed us to hold the government and accountable for the impacts that they were doing on traditional territory and on reserve. And it also built relationships with the government, federal, provincial, third parties. After that, we did develop our land code, and this allowed us to sign up for the framework agreement under the First Nation Lands Management. And what this does is it erases 25% of the Indian Act and 44 sections under the that it gets rid of. For us, that's very important because when we want to operate, say if it's a cannabis store or any other store, we don't have to go through Section 28.2, which could take up to 2 years, 2.5 years sometimes. Now, we can actually operate at the speed of business at our own pace. The other one we did is the First Nation the First Nation Financial Management Board. Through that, we developed our own financial administration law. We set up policies. It also set us up for the 10-year grant. And from there, once we were certified with the First Nation Finance Board, sorry, I'm still getting used to all these acronyms, but I called Frank, and Frank came down to Shawanagan there. He did his presentation to the Chief and Council, and before you know it, we were a boring member of the First Nation Financial Authority. And right now, we have all our finances in place for our cannabis store and more. All right. And like many other First Nations, Shawanagan struggled with the concept of applying to Ontario or asking Ontario for permission for to do a cannabis store on First Nations land. It took a very long discussion between the leadership. They actually debated for probably a few days. After it was all said and done, they finally gave me the green light to apply through the lottery that they were holding. And then, I guess it was in July, July 31st, 2019, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, AGCO, Ontario Gaming Commissions Ontario, began accepting applications for applicants who wish to operate a store on First Nations Reserve. To apply for the store, it was a first come, first basis. And with that, I think we were the first out of 8 that got the license in Ontario. And instrumental person for that was Cherie Brandt. I know she's in the back there. She helped us with this, and we're excited to move forward with it. We're just trying to figure out how we can do this. There was somebody that mentioned a saying yesterday, saying that we are flying as we're learning to. No, what did he say? We're flying. We're learning to fly as we build the plane. I think that's what one of the chiefs said. But that really hit home because right now we're trying to figure out how we're going to operate a cannabis store. And we have no clue really. So again, I'm looking forward to hearing my next panelist there because we're looking for partners. And this here is a prefab concept that we have in Shawanagan. This is what we went, me and the economic development officer have been searching around for the quickest way to get a store up and running. And this is what we came back with. This company builds prefab units. They're based out of Toronto, and they meet all the regulations set aside from Ontario Cannabis Store and the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. And this is just some more concept of that. One of the tricky things is when we applied for the Ontario license, we were struggling with the address. I know it sounds silly, but one of the things when we applied for the license is they told us that we couldn't move the address around. And for us, that was a big issue, only because we wanted to put our retail store open like at our current highway service center that we have now, which is on Highway 69. But we do have a future location being developed. So we were struggling, so what we did is we put it with the future location highway service center, and then we were prepping and trying to get the site done as quickly as possible so we can get the store up and running. Luckily, the location condition under the license since has changed, so now we can actually have our cannabis store at our current gas and variety store, and we can start generating revenue as we prepare our new highway service center area. The plan is obviously get ready and get the project moving quickly as possible. One of the most important factors for the cannabis retail store for us is to make sure the community has proper education and awareness around this product. This is one of the most important things to us. The finance, as I mentioned, is in place. We've been meeting with various proponents, a lot of people coming out of the woodworks that want to partner with us, so we're being very picky on that. We want to make sure that if we do get in bed with somebody, that we want to make sure it's somebody that the community is going to accept. One of the other things that are very a priority for us is getting the business licensing law and cannabis law. I mentioned yesterday we're very close to finalizing that. Cherie Brandt, again, is helping us with that. And I think we're about 90-95% done. I can't wait till that's over just so we can get going. And again, this is just allows all operations on the First Nation, if it's members, non-members, third parties, they all operate under the same rules and regulations. And this is the big picture. We are currently in negotiations with the Ministry of Transportation, MTO, because what they're doing is they're widening Highway 69. I'm not sure who's familiar with that, but Shawanigan is in a unique position where we have an economic opportunity in front of us, and what we're trying to do is we're negotiating with MTO, and what we were aiming for, I don't know if everybody's seen an on route. So what we were doing was we were negotiating with the ministry to have an on-route actually on the First Nation. It would be the first, but after we wasted a lot of time with the ministry, they ended up letting us know that they have an agreement with on-routes that gives them on-route in exclusivity to major highways, and it's not an option for us to have an on-route. So once we found that out, we said, okay, fine, we're going to build an on-res, and that's what we're doing. So. We just signed up our general contractor, and as the chief would say, and I know Chief Day knows Chief Modulon very well, he was saying the shovels are going to hit the ground within the month. So we're excited for that. It's been a long time coming, and that picture there is roughly the concept of what we're going for. And this is just Highway 69, the clearing there, that's where we're going to be putting that concept I was just showing you. Oh, sorry. Trying to operate two things. But yeah, that's the Highway 69. The clearing is where we're going to be putting that concept. To the left of that, I think it's to the left is where the interchange will be going. And if you can make that out, there. If you can make that out, you can see the two circles there. That's the clover leaf. We'll be going in there with the Highway Service Center as well as our cannabis store. What it will do is allow us to capture the current highway traffic. And then once MTO finally comes back to the table to do some negotiations, and if their highway does get approved by the community, that's what it will look like going through 69. So we can capture, the future highway as well. So we fit right into the interchange nicely. And again, this is just more of the concept, and this is the first phase. This is our on-res idea. With this allows the cannabis store to be within that area, as well as 3 food franchises. It'll be a convenience store, gift shop, and gas and diesel. I'm rushing through because I want to make sure the other panelists have some time. And then this is more of the concept that we're going for. It's more of a conventional style concept. And with that inside, we hope to have more of an Indigenous Ojibwe feel. And obviously, the goals of Shawanigan for this project with the cannabis store and the highway service center is to create more jobs, own source revenue, enhance programs and services for members, create better awareness around cannabis. And that's all I have for today. Miigwech.
Thank you, Adam. And can we get Jasmine up now? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I think, oh, there you go. I've got my PowerPoint up there. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that we are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Syilx Okanagan First Nation. I'd like to thank the elders, Elder Jane, as well as Elder Wilfred yesterday, and Councillor Jacob, I think it was? Jordan, sorry. Apologies. Councillor Jordan for the very warm welcome and welcoming us in a good way to their territories. This panel is called Retail Experience, Is It All Worth It? And I'm going to start off my presentation by saying that I'm certainly not in a position to answer that question. So if you're coming to me for an answer for that, you might be in the wrong place. That being said, I do think that I firmly believe that it's for every nation to make the decision for themselves as to whether or not it's right for them, for their community, and for every business operator to make that decision as well. In making that decision, I recognize that there's also the consideration for many nations as to whether or not to take the sovereign route, which we've discussed, or to take the federal provincial framework that's been set out. Because I've been asked to speak about my experiences working with the federal provincial framework, that's what I'll be focusing my presentation on today. Specifically, I'll be going over some of the key considerations that anyone who is looking to get into retail should consider, as well as some of the challenges that you might experience and some of the benefits of doing so. And so here's a quick overview of what we'll be talking about in the next 10 or so minutes, I believe. Perfect. 8 minutes. I will do this quicker. So who are we? I'm the CEO of Purple Cannabis Consulting, which I founded about a year ago. We work largely with legacy operators and with new entrants, anyone who's looking to get in the cannabis industry. With legacy operators, we work with them to help with the transition process, whether at an operational level or at a licensing level. And for new entrants, we bring our cannabis industry experience and our regulatory expertise, and we help them to navigate that process and get their operation off the ground with business planning and with the licensing process and kind of anything that's in between there. Prior to founding Cannabis, I worked as an executive with Trees, the largest cannabis retailer in BC prior to legalization. As an executive there, I wore many different hats, and I helped grow the company from 4 stores to 10 stores across BC, largely in Victoria and Nanaimo areas. And we employed up to about 180 people at the max. Right now, we're still working with them on the licensing process as well. In the past year, so about 9 or 10 months ago, Cannabis started working with Sechot First Nation after community provided direction to council, as Hugh had mentioned. And we worked with them in terms of, from the very beginning, so in terms of business planning, understanding the project that they wanted to move forward on, obtaining the loan agreement from NEDC, and obtaining the funding to source that project. We worked with them in terms of hiring the management team that now runs the operations. We worked with them in tailoring SOPs and implementing those, in identifying the POS and IMS system that was required, in doing the training with management and staff in terms of compliance, but as well as in terms of cannabis retail preparedness, so learning how to properly retail cannabis in a compliant manner. And basically anything that was required from start to finish, we were there to assist with. Our goal was to help Sechot First Nation build the capacity to run the store. Our goal wasn't to work with them in in relying on us to run the retail store for the long term. And so I can very proudly say that Sechot First Nation's Orange Bridge Cannabis is the first First Nation-owned provincially licensed retail cannabis store in BC. It's fully run by the nation and it's fully operated by the nation. So if you're thinking about retail, there's a few considerations that I'd like to bring to your attention. The first of all, which has been addressed briefly previously by Adam, is a strong business plan. I know that you'd mentioned that, because you're flying by the seat of your pants and getting through to all this, it's not necessarily possible because we're in such a quick-moving industry. For any retail consideration, if you do have the time to do so, understanding that there is that kind of urgency often, it's very important to have a strong business plan that will drive any business that you're going to be running. The other thing that the second most important consideration I would say is community support. This is particularly the case in the cannabis industry, and especially with retail because it is a community-facing enterprise. And the third is because you're looking at retail, it's location. Location, location, location. You hear this all the time with retail. A good location will make or break your business. And so with that, you want to make sure that you do your research. So see if there's any existing competitors that are out there, perform your market analysis, any laws or regulations that you might need to implement as a nation, any zoning requirements if you're going in as a business operator and depending on the location that you've chosen. Some questions that you might want to ask yourself include, will you have community support for both the location and the business? Will you receive enough traffic visiting your potential location? Will that traffic sustain your business and consume your products? That's very important. You're selling the product. Are there any existing competitors in the area? And if so, how does their location compare to yours? Because we are looking at a very heavily regulated industry that requires a lot of compliance, you're going to be looking at elevated costs relative to any other retail in terms of security build out, in terms of compliance requirement, in terms of security design, et cetera. And so here I've got a table of estimated first year costs, assuming that you're running a retail business in BC and going through the LCRB's licensing system. And so initially you've got the $7,500 licensing fee, which is non-refundable for the most part to the BC government. You're looking at a lease, likely, unless you own the property, which would be a separate consideration. Your lease could range anywhere depending on your terms. I've inserted here for about $4,000 a month gross lease. Leasehold improvements, that's completely up to you. I've seen anywhere from $75,000 to over $700,000. The BC government, for instance, usually dumps between $500,000 to $750,000 based on what I've seen for their building permits in any of their establishments. You've also got hardware and POS because that's where you're going to be selling, those are the tills that you're selling out of, and the inventory management software that you're going to be using to do compliant tracking. You've got staffing costs, which I've budgeted here for $332,000. That would be for assuming a minimum of 6 full-time employees working 15 hours, so running a store for 15 hours from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. And that's anywhere from the management down to the customer service representative. And then you've also got your insurance cost, your security, so your cameras, your data retention, installation, et cetera. And then you've got your LCRB application approval fee, which once they actually grant you the license, that's your annual licensing fee, which will be paid at an annual basis. And then you've also got inventory. I've allocated here $75,000 for cannabis products and $25,000 for cannabis accessories. That's entirely up to you. Again, some of these are dependent largely on the scope of your business. And so in total, you're looking at probably about $608,000 in terms of estimated first year costs. I will note that because we've included staffing here and that takes up $332,000, your CapEx or your capital expenditure is probably something around $276,000. Again, this will vary based on the scope of your business. So beyond your capital investment, you're also looking at a time investment for cannabis retail, especially because you're going through a licensing process. And so the licensing, from my experience, can range anywhere from 3 months to, I've been working on applications since last August that we're still working through the financial integrity and security screening process for. And so that's 15 months and counting. For that reason, the way that you structure your business and your application is very important in terms of lowering the time involvement of the licensing process. A few questions that you want to consider if you're at the early stages is, who is your applicant? Is it the nation? Is it a private corporation that's wholly owned by the nation? Is it a private corporation that you own with a few shareholders? If it's a private, or is it a sole proprietorship? If you are looking to do a corporation, how many shareholders are there? Who are the directors? How many key people are involved in your business in terms of executive management level? The more people, the more folks that need to be screened by the province, and so the lengthier the process. For Orange Ridge Cannabis, the nation is the licensee, and so for that reason, we were able to structure a very simple application with them, and we submitted that application to the province in beginning of May, and 3 months later, we received the license at the end of August. I will note that some provinces and territories have a dedicated stream for Indigenous applicants, and BC is one of them, so we were able to use that to our advantage. In terms of compliance, as I've mentioned, because cannabis is a heavily regulated industry, there's a lot of rules that have been put in place by both the federal government and provincial governments, as well as by various nations and by local municipalities and et cetera. And so you are looking at elevated costs for that, and you're also looking at a lot of different considerations in order to maintain your license after you've obtained it. I'm not going to go into this because I don't have a lot of time, but this PowerPoint will also be available online after my speech. Some of the challenges. We've touched on this before with all the previous panelists as well, and this has been a topic of discussion throughout the entire conference. One of the main challenges I will identify is that you have to work through the provincial and territorial government. And so that becomes a very political question. Separate to that, you are also subject to the whim of the bureaucratic process. And so as such, as was mentioned by Councillor Hugh Breaker earlier, and I know this was also the case for the Cure when they received their licensing, there were a lot of delays in getting the workers qualified at Orange Ridge Cannabis. We received the license at the end of August, and we couldn't run full operations for probably about 2 weeks. The last person got their qualification last month. So they had to wait 3 months before they actually got the workers' qualification, and it was of no fault of their own. It was just because it was a very timely very time-consuming red tape process put together by the province. Another challenge that was mentioned earlier as well is you're going to be in competition with gray market operators. So as we've mentioned, they often will have superior quality product. That's probably product that they've harvested within the past month or so, and so arrives to their shelves fresh, whereas you're dealing with product that you might have gotten packaged a year ago, so who even knows when that was harvested. They're also often seeing lower prices in the gray market, as well as fewer or no regulatory costs and existing customer bases that are loyal to that brand and to that location. Even with increased enforcement that we've seen across Canada on unregulated dispensaries and whatnot, you've also got folks who are then going to go back to their street dealers, to their black market dealers, and so that's not going to be, that you're still going to be facing that kind of competition. The National Cannabis Survey, the Q3 2019, so just this past quarter, reported that only 28% of Canadians obtain all of their cannabis from a legal source. 53% obtain some of their cannabis from a legal source, and so there's still heavy competition with the gray and black markets there. Even after you pass that hurdle, you still got competition with government stores in provinces and territories where we see a hybrid model, such as in BC. And so a hybrid model would be where you've got the government-run stores, so BC Cannabis stores, for instance, here, as well as private operators. Like I'd said earlier, the BC Cannabis store is able to spend $500,000 to $700,000 in leasehold improvements. Most private operators probably don't want to put in that capital, even if they do have it, or may not have access to that type of capital to open their business. And so the BC government here also has a monopoly on online sales at the moment, as well as on the distribution system. And so you are facing some very stiff competition on that level as well. And lastly, this is something that was addressed many times yesterday, and I know that Manny Duels provided another great presentation on that. It's that First Nations still are excluded from tax jurisdiction and excise tax revenue, whereas the federal government currently receives 25% of all excise tax revenue generated on cannabis sales. The provinces and territories in which those sales happen receive 75%, and that's due to the increased regulatory, health, and education requirements that they're responsible for. First Nations also have the same regulatory, health, and education requirements to their own respective communities, but see no profit from those revenues from excise tax, not even generated on their own reserve lands. So after some of the challenges, I want to switch gears a little bit and drive over to some of the benefits of entering into cannabis retail for anyone who's considering it. I don't want to scare you away entirely, but these are good considerations to keep in mind. One of the main benefits I can think of off the top of my head is that it's the lowest barrier to entry relative to any other license class in cannabis. It's a clearly defined, small and manageable scope for any business operator to get into. And it's a relatively quick licensing process, especially relative to licensed producer classes with Health Canada, which often will see more significant capital investment as well as lengthier time investment of upwards to a year, depending on, especially if you're doing a standard process or a cultivator. It provides for employment opportunities for between 6 to, I'd say, even 20 people, from what I've seen, depending on the store size and the scale of your operations again. And so that provides employment for your community and for your members. It requires less specialization in terms of personnel requirements than the cultivation and processor classes with Health Canada, whereas the processor class requires a quality assurance person and the cultivation class requires a master grower. All you would really need are qualified retail employees ranging from the management level to the customer service level who can pass a security screening. It also allows for control of the nation of an emerging industry and how the community engages with that industry on its own territory, which is very important to a lot of nations, I understand. And lastly, as has been mentioned before, it's a steady and profitable business. It provides for the security and the sustainability of a long-term venture. It's not going to make you very rich, like Hugh said, but it's a steady business that can contribute to the revenues of your nation or to yourself if you're entering this as a private business person. And And so what's this all mean? Like I said at the beginning of this is not a decision that I'm able to make for you. This is a decision that falls on yourselves and your communities in collaboration and discussion as to what's best for yourself. I will note that the industry is at a very early stage. As it matures, we're going to see shifts in regulations. We've already seen some of those with legalization 2.0 that happened last month. We know that the medical system will be under review in another 4 years, and so we can see some more shifts from there. What I've been able to do is present an overview of the industry as it is and as it changes. We're all going to see what the future of cannabis holds here. If you have any questions about my presentation or any questions to me directly, you can always reach out to me. I've provided my email here as well. Thank you very much for your time and for your consideration.